This is Sandesh here from Cyclopean Eye Productions from India, and you're watching Stormbringer, the Austrian heavy zine.
Yeah, I'm sitting here in beautiful Hampi in India. You can see the temples behind me with Sandesh Shenoy, a guy who's very essential when it comes to metal in India. Sandesh, nice to have you here in these beautiful surroundings. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to the metal business, or as a child to the metal, or something like that?
Sure. So I have been, staying in India for, since I was born over here. I've stayed in quite a few different cities. And initially, I had these cousins of mine who were staying in Bangalore. At that time, I was located in Bombay, and I used to come to Bangalore for a holiday. And these cousins were, of course, older than me, and they were guys into, Iron Maiden, Slayer, Megadeth, even Napalm Death, and I'm talking about somewhere in 91, 92. And back then I was into, pop, like Michael Jackson and Madonna. And
yeah, we all were.
Yeah.
Basically.
So I land up at this party that's happening at my cousin's place, and, these guys are playing some really heavy stuff, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, it's like something really, heavy. In the beginning, of course, I didn't like it because I was coming from a completely pop background. 80s pop background. And but I was always into the occult. I was very fascinated by the occult. My dad, in fact, was a palmist. He used to read palms, and he was very good at predictions. And I think that kind of caught on to me. And when I started looking at these tapes, and I used to see all these satanic figures, and that completely sucked me in. Okay, and I went back to Indore, and there was this particular friend of mine who I introduced to metal, and then we started buying these dub tapes. Okay, they were like, back then it was pretty expensive to get a Xerox copy tape, which was like 90 Indian rupees. It was really a big amount, but
something like tape trading, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. But there was a small shop in this place called Indore, which is situated in Madhya Pradesh. It's filled with Bollywood music, but this particular guy had tapes from Maiden. He had, Megadeth, and all these other bands. And so this guy, since he had more money, because his grandmother was very free with the money to him, he used to get really like 300 rupees a month, which was in 92, that was a lot of money. So he used to pick up the tapes, and I used to like tell him what to pick up, and we'd both share these tapes and like start listening to the music. Then I moved back to Bangalore after my dad passed away, and I got into a lot of the blues and classic rock from the 60s and the 70s, because I met a bunch of these guys who were into Frank Zappa, Led Zeppelin, Grand Funk Railroad, Black Sabbath, and early Judas Priest and stuff. And I started discovering more because these cousins of mine started giving me more music, and started from Slayer again, getting into Sepultura, and then going more and more deeper into the music, because I was heavily into the occult at that time, reading a lot of stuff on Satanism, Wiccans, and black magic from Egypt, and all these philosophies, and Nietzsche and all that.
So basically the same way European metalheads get into the metal, basically, right?
Absolutely the same way, yeah. Wherever you are in the world, if you are into this kind of stuff, I guess it's a common ground where you find, mutual people meeting up and getting the stuff.
And is it different to be a metalhead in India compared to the status of society with all the caste system and everything like that? At least you're born a Roman Catholic, right?
I'm half Roman Catholic. I'm half, like, my mom's Roman Catholic, but my dad's Brahmin, Hindu Brahmin.
Yeah.
So
are you kind of an outcast here if you are a metalhead, if you're running around with shirts like that or something?
Yeah, not exactly an outcast. Of course, people look at you strangely. And of course, people over here think, rock and roll and metal is all about drugs and like drinking and women and shit like that.
Decadent.
Very decadent, which is, I don't deny it is, but
It is, yeah.
yeah, I love that part. But I mean, yeah, the maximum people would like, if you had long hair, people would look at you strangely. But then people just become used to it. I mean, when I walk into my, like the place I stay in, the area, people know I dress like this. They know I have a certain way of dressing. And even as I mentioned earlier, like I was staying wherever I was working also, even in my companies that I worked for corporates, I would still walk in with a metal t-shirt and they'd still be okay with that. So from a social standpoint of view, I believe most metalheads in India are from the middle class. The poor pretty much don't care about metal. The rich, of course, want to go to discos and want to listen to
Other
EDM.
concerns.
Yeah, bigger concerns like earning money. It's the middle class which is the frustrated class and which is basically bearing the brunt of all the taxes, because it's in India the rich and the poor escape the taxes. But the middle class, since they are salaried people, they have to pay taxes. And what happens is this frustration gets in besides with the government, corruption, poverty around you. And most of these middle class people are educated. So metal is like a calling to them, It's like talking about the injustice in the society. And I mean, it depends on the metal, of course, you're listening to. But it still grabs this middle class thing. And I remember saying this in an interview, metal is the opium of the middle class in India. Masses in India, yeah. I would say that. I mean, of course, the other middle class listen to a lot of other music, but there's a sizable amount of people in India who listen to metal.
At some point you started your own business. You have a record label called Cyclopean Eye Productions. Would you tell me a little bit about that? What band does it feature, and where do we want to go with that?
Yeah, sure. So Cyclopean Eye Productions was actually started as a distribution service. Even before I started doing the label and the distribution service, I actually had another small distribution service which I used to get extreme metal CDs and heavy metal CDs for people in my friend circle. And the thing is, I actually got ripped off by one of the labels in Europe, and back then it was a lot of money. It was just €100 back then, but I'm talking about 2002, 2003, and it was a lot for an Indian guy who was not even I just earning like maybe 3,000 Indian rupees teaching somewhere or whatever, like teaching English and stuff like that. So I just thought, I said, fuck this, I'll just forget this, label business and doing the distribution. Or this would have started long back ago had I not got ripped off by this guy. So, but as I keep saying, metal is like a drug. And you're like a junkie basically. Once it gets into your system, it's really difficult to get it out of there. And there's this really horrible itch that you can't scratch that keeps nagging in the back of your mind, like you have to do something. And the more you consume music, the more you want to do something about it. So initially, when I started Cyclopean Eye in 2010, I started again as a distribution service, but this time it was not just for my friends. I started contacting other people and I said, okay, I have this music service. I would get you CDs from different underground labels abroad. And people started picking up stuff for me. And I remember that I decided that I wanted to finally do a label and sign a band. And I was searching, high and low for bands. But I was very particular about having a South Asian band as my first release, because I was very passionate about the Asian scene, and I wanted a band that would suit my theme of the label, which was a very occult-based theme or a very nihilist theme or anti-religious theme. And I was in touch with a lot of bands from South Asia back then. Bands like Dying Embrace from India, Funeral in Heaven from Sri Lanka, Ugra Karma from Nepal, Orator from Bangladesh, and Dusk from Pakistan. And I remember talking to the guy from Funeral in Heaven, and I told him, like, dude, I'm looking for a band to sign my label. It's a brand new label, but I'm very passionate about this. And he says, guess what? You know what? I just started a new band, and maybe you want to check it out. But I said, dude, there's one thing. If it's a band that you started, I love your band Funeral in Heaven, but I'm very particular about few things. I want it to be black or death metal, really dark and disturbing black or death metal. I wanted to have an occult significance. I wanted to be bone-crushingly heavy. And this guy says, just give me a couple of days. I'm almost done with one of the songs. I've mixed and mastered it. I'll send you a sample. 2 days later, he sends me the sample, and within the first 2 minutes of listening to it, and I'm like, dude, I got to tell you something. I fucking love your band, okay? I love the music, and I'm going to do as much as I can do to promote this music. But please, if there's another bigger label that's going to be there and who wants to pick you up, please don't sign to them, sign to me, okay? And he's like, sure, dude. I mean, he, of course...
so they were the first band you signed?
Yes, Genocide Shines,
Yep.
Which was the name of the band, formed by members of Funeral in Heaven, was the first band that I signed in 2011. And they, of course, went to be like one of my most popular bands. They've got a lot of rave reviews from the US, from European countries, a lot of fans over there. Big time fans in South America, of all places, and pretty much even Asia. And they become like one of the most significant forces from the underground Asian scene right now.
So maybe we can have a little listen into the Genocide Shrines.
Sure.
We will have a look into the video.
Yes.
So you said there's a very, very big point in the bands you sign. They have to be occult or obscure or something like that, and anti-religious or something, or I don't know, nihilistic. So there's a very weird symbolic here in Asia when it comes to mythic and mystic things. Like you still use the swastikas in some kind of ways, which is not like that in Europe. And there are maybe other symbols that are not really familiar to the European audience or something like that. How is it over here? Is it easy to bring out bands that like where the people say like, wow, they are really controversial or something like that?
Yeah. So the thing is, of course, there is controversy in most of the metal bands. Others, it wouldn't be metal at all, right? So I would say being nihilist or being even satanic in a place with more not so open cultures by itself is a big thing, okay? The second thing is, you mentioned about certain political symbols, but you have to understand that they are religious symbols for us, and they are very important in our part of culture. So it may be a little bit different in Europe, but I mean, you have names in India like swastik. Swastik is the name of a guy, swastika is the name of a girl. So these are very deeply religious thing, and if you tell any Hindu or thing, that this symbol should be banned, they are not obviously going to agree with you, because it has a completely different connotation over here. And we are proud of our symbols, and I don't think we need to, explain to anybody else why we need to, have these symbols, because it's a part of our past, and we are proud of our past. I have signed a couple of bands that are quite controversial in their own right, in their own countries, because they talk about the political situation over there. And of course, for example, Sri Lanka is a hotbed of politics because you've had a civil war for a very long time.
And right now there are some riots going on right now.
There are some Sinhala Buddhist versus Muslim riots going on there. But again, Muslims are a minority over there. So it's the guys who are in power right now, the Buddhist militants. I mean, imagine Buddhism having militants, but they're there in Burma, they're there in Sri Lanka, and you cannot even wear a tattoo, a Buddhist tattoo, and walk in Sri Lanka and stuff. It's that way. India is a lot more peaceful, even though some people may disagree, because if you have symbols of certain gods on your legs, it's kind of considered offensive. So these kind of bands, I promote these bands because they talk about freedom of speech. And they are right in their own ways, because they talk for the minorities, or they talk for the downtrodden, or rather they just show the harsh realities of life. I think that's more important for any band, to show the truth or show the mirror to the society. This is what you are.
Something about love and happiness and unicorns.
Yes,
right.
That is power metal.
That's power metal.
Yeah, that's living in a different way, world altogether. Yeah, it doesn't exist over here. Not in the third world, at least.
There's no power metal in the third world. There's not over here in India.
There are heavy metal bands, but not power metal. I guess it's difficult to find really worthy heavy metal bands, except maybe one band over here called Cryptos from Bangalore, my city. Yeah, they're quite well known.
Yeah. There's also another band from Bangalore called DYING EMBRACE, right? And we will have a look into that right now. Cyclopean Eye is a small label who does like small amounts of records and CDs and patches and shirts and everything. And you also do the Trendslaughter Festival in Bangalore. Where do you want to go with your business? Where do you want to go with your label? Is there any attempt to try to get a foot in the door, like in Europe or something?
Yeah, this is quite a nice question you asked me, because first of all, I have a vision about the label. I want the label to release music that I really enjoy and I adore, of course. And I told you the theme was anti-religious, nihilistic, and occult oriented stuff, or really harsh politics, or stuff like that. But as far as my label goes, I would like to get a foothold, of course, in Europe and other places. I keep traveling to Europe quite a few times. I mean, at least once a year, to meet people and go for shows and stuff. And I'm surprised that even bigger bands and bigger, metalheads from there recognize the bands that I sign. And for me, it is very important to push bands from South Asia, because this is like practically unknown. I mean, very few people know. They can name South Asian bands on their fingertips, basically, or on just one hand. So my main objective is to push, one is the ideology of what I talked about. The second is to push bands that play really good music from here. Third thing, of course, I would like to make this a full-time effort of mine, so I don't have to. I used to be a former journalist, and I was working in the internet marketing section, and I'm fed up with the whole. I don't like that life. I would love to do music and dedicate my entire life to this music. So I would like to see myself at least going somewhere where people recognize the bands that I sign, and I'm able to run the label for a longer time.
Yeah, But it's definitely worth checking out Cyclopean Eye Productions and Sander's other stuff. Like maybe you won't come to the Trendslaughter Fest, which is basically next year.
Yes, Trendslaughter Fest will be held again next year. We haven't decided the lineup yet because we just finished our festival with Cult of Fire from Czech Republic, Draconis Infernal from Singapore. We had 3 Indian bands. One Dying Embrace from India, from Bangalore, India, Empyrean from Bangalore, India, and Moral Putrefaction from Chennai, India. And we had one surprise artist called Hemant, who is a power electronics artist. I just wanted to check what the vibe was in, you know,
how push the borders a little bit.
Yeah. I wanted to see how the metalheads would react, and it was quite nice that they reacted quite well to it.
Okay, so come to India, meet Sandesh, or Sandesh comes to Europe and you meet him somewhere on the festival in summertime. India is definitely a really stunning place. You're seeing this little palace in the background here. We are still in Hampi, which is somewhere south of
India.
South of everything.
South of India.
South of India. And Cyclopean Eye Production, Sandesh, I say thank you, and check out the stuff. It's definitely worth it. There are really good bands on it, and we're gonna drink some. We're gonna drink some
beer. Yes.
Some Kingfisher beer now, I guess. Right. Okay.
The weather demands.
So.
Cheers.